Okay, call the meeting to order. Mike, can you call roll?
Mr. Bedford. Ms. Hogue.
Here.
Ms. Paoli. Mr. Sangillo. Mr. Seidel.
Here.
Mr. Vecchio.
Here.
Ms. Hogartle.
Here.
Ms. Crooked.
Yeah. We stand for the pledge. Okay, Mike, can you read the statement concerning open public meetings?
Public notice of this meeting pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Act has been given by the Superintendent of Schools in the following manner. On January 15th, 2021, notice of this meeting was posted on the interior of the school administration offices, 1 Lincoln Avenue, Haddonfield. Written notice was submitted and filed with the Haddonfield Borough Clerk, and notices were faxed to the Courier Post and mailed to the Retrospect newspaper.
Thank you. Do we have any student commentations today?
We do not.
No regular commentations, right?
No.
Okay, we have Will Kennedy here to do our student representatives report. Will, take it away.
So the first things that we wanted to cover was the new bell schedule, and in that we were talking with other students in the school about the block in the 8th period and how it was positive for the most part, besides the fact that sometimes lunches can get a little bit confusing on the lengths of them, and when students are supposed to come back, as it does change every day. Yet for the most part, it has been working well, and during half of those lunches, peer leadership classes for freshman orientation are taking place, and they have been going well, and it's gotten decent feedback from freshmen. And with an opening month student survey, Ms. McHale and my fellow student representatives are going to work on a student survey to be released next week to get the overall feeling of how HMHS students are reacting to kind of going back full in person, still having masks on, and see how everybody's feeling about it. And hopefully that will be released by next week, if not the week after that. And another point that we want to discuss was Bright Night Dance. It will be on October 28th. It will be outside in the deep courtyard, but it will also be in the gym where students will have to wear masks inside, but outside they don't have to. And different clubs, per usual, will have committees in which they run them. And so far, I know from personal experience as a part of them that these clubs are getting right to it with advertising so as many students can attend as possible. And running masks in the school has gone decently well with social distancing and wearing properly. I understand there was some difficulties with some students about properly separating during lunch times, but for the most part, it's gone very well as we do have the ability to spread out more and be able to take our masks off outside during lunch because it's still nice out. And then another thing, throughout this week, we've been taking the Start Strong testing through the state, and the delays, personally, a lot of students found that it was sometimes a little confusing when we were supposed to come into school. And I know personally, I only took one of the tests. I took it this morning, and it was pretty clear. The instructions were clear. I didn't hear anybody really have any issues with it, and it was kind of one and done. It was pretty easy for everybody for the most part, and we kind of discussed the purpose of them and things like that. And then another issue that we wanted to discuss was the PSAT seminars that we are now doing for 9th through 11th graders, and to weigh these seminars are a way for 9th through 11th graders to hear how they go and how PSATs go from producing graduates, and but also it's new that 9th through 11th graders are taking the PSAT. And then another thing we discussed was Senior Day. I understand a lot of students came to me and my other representatives about having
and thanked everybody for that hard work.
Thank you. Anyone else have any updates? Any updates? Okay. Tina, Dr. Pearl, do you have an update for us?
I don't have any reports.
Thank you. Klaus?
Sure. Here we go. So I've got a couple things to talk about. Most of it will be pretty quick, though. Actually, all of them will be. So we've been having some hiccups with elementary lunches, and it's along lines of ordering and being efficient with our ordering, and how we're doing the ordering process. We've met with food services, NutriServe several times. met with them again today, and we're just working at the kinks. So it's something that, there's a lot of reasons why they're understaffed, like many people are these days. Their supply lines are not as efficient. They're having trouble getting hold of things, right? So they're making last minute adjustments to the menus, which for us probably wouldn't be a big deal. For a 6-year-old is a huge deal because I was expecting to get this today, now I get that today. And I will tell you, my 1 year as an elementary school principal, there's nothing in life, and Mr. Bissinger can confirm this, that will prepare you for the first day of first grade lunch. It is horrifying. So
It was really fun when it started pouring rain and we were outside.
yeah. So given the nature of the clientele, the little guys, and some of those things, it's a matter of just ironing out. But they're a very service-oriented group, NutriServe, so it's something that we'll solve very shortly, I believe. But just in case, that's something that has been being worked on. There it is. QSAC is back. We met for what was 2.5 hours today. With the county, it felt longer. So QSAC we have a date, November 15th. We have to have all of our QSAC information in. And the first thing we're going to do is get a committee together to do a self-assessment. Then by November 15th, we'll have all the information put in. Actually, we're going to put it in for a request for an extension because our voting meeting in November is November 18th, and you have to vote, you have to approve the self-assessment. So we'll go through all of this. We'll put in for an extension to the 19th, go through the process. And the 5 areas that we know very well is instruction and programming, which is going to look a little different this year because there hasn't been standardized testing the last 2 years. That's a good chunk of that. Fiscal management, which is Mike's world, and he promised us to get 100. Governance, which is our world. Operations, which is Dr. Priologino's world, and then personal. Dr. Murray has this instruction program, and personnel, which is kind of 4 or 5 different groups. Personnel involves PD. It involves making sure everyone has proper certification, making sure that all those records are in place, and making sure we have training and monitoring, mentoring programs and all that. It was difficult the last time we went through it because we hadn't gone through it in 11 years. We went through it 3 years ago, and then 2 years ago we were going to redo it, but we didn't do very well. I think it's going to be pretty easy, smooth, not easy sailing. It's going to be much easier this year than it was in the past because we're prepared for it. Last time we went through it, we put tools in place to be ready for this time, so there won't be as much panicking and running around. And you'll be hearing more about it. We'll have a presentation on it in November. So it's just too far away. Yes.
Did they provide a new rubric for instruction in
So
since 80% of the score was your
60%.
or 60?
So they're going back 2 years for standardized testing, but they're also that's going to come from the 2018-19 school year. They're going to use that, but they're also asking us now to look at local-based measurements we're using and talk about how we do that. So there's a little tweaking to it, but I'm not really, after watching this today, I'm not really quite sure what it's going to look like as much as once we start pulling together, we'll call up and ask them, say, what is this going to look like?
Sure. State standard adherence anyway. Just like that.
So what happens is every one of these areas, the state puts together a slide deck, a slideshow, and then each county goes through. So they follow this, and then you call them up because you work with them on a regular basis. And say, what do you mean by that? And they say, oh, here we go.
Okay.
And then what will happen is at the curriculum roundtable, we'll talk about it. So Colleen will be on top of it on the BA roundtable. Mike will talk about it there. So that's when we get that in nuts and bolts.
Sure. Thank you.
Start Strong testing. We heard a little bit about that earlier. Start Strong testing is finished except for the DLM, which are the learning maps for students with IEPs. Start Strong is in place. What it is a way to, it's a lot of things. One of the things is it's tied to federal money. We have to have standardized testing, and it hasn't happened because of it. So it was put in the beginning of the year so we could see, districts could see if there's a learning loss or learning gap that happened. It's made to be put in place so that it can be results quickly, it can be taken back, analyzed, and see where deficiencies may be for students. What it is not, is it doesn't replace local benchmark testing. So the question comes, you did Start Strong, you're still doing the Lincoln testing, why are you doing two? Start Strong is not meant to replace that. It's meant to give us a different piece, a different point of view, a different data point. It is not replacing standardized state testing at the end of the year. That's still in place. So that's what Start Strong is, a gap to fill in to give us data. The tested areas are, you can see it there, English for 4 to 10, math 4 to 8, and then some content math, and then science in 6, 9, and 12. Science has traditionally been 11th grade test, but I gave 12 on this. What this test really looked like, it looked like the NJSLA test, but in English, you only take 3 sections, we took 1. And they closed out not a lot of open-ended questions because they wanted to get the results back quickly. We actually have the results for individual kids, right? So because there were no open response questions, we can go on and we can see individualized results. We don't have aggregated data to give out. We don't have official student reports to send to parents. That'll come in October. But teachers can go on now and they can see scores of their students. So it can be useful data. And that's what the Start Strong test is. As I said, we finished it basically.
So can I ask a question on that? Is the data more for the individual school districts, or is New Jersey Department of Ed planning to use that data for some?
I'm sure that it is designed to be useful data for us, but there's no doubt in my mind that the Department of Ed is going to be looking at it too. There's going to be, I'm sure, money, federal and state money funneling to try to help close learning gaps due to COVID. This will help them direct some of that money. So they're going to use the data, no doubt. But this is data for us. I don't think. It's just me thinking, so I probably shouldn't say this, but I don't think folks think that well. I don't think this will be used as NJSLA. We're going to put out like comparisons of school data. I don't think that's what this is. This is more for, hey, we can see this school needs help, this one doesn't, but it's not going to be part of your school report card, those type of things. Okay. This will be used for these specific purposes.
I was wondering about this though. If this is a new test and you're using it to gauge whether or not there's been learning loss, but you don't have a baseline from this same test, how do you make that comparison?
I think because it's a version of it's a shortened version of NJSLA. So they can look at historic data where someone would be, a third grade would be for NJSLA and those pieces. Okay. It's not going to, to your point, it's not going to be an accurate assessment of whether there's learning loss because you don't have another benchmark at the other end. But you can look at a fourth grade and say, fourth graders, these are standards they usually hit traditionally across, and we're below or higher.
Okay, so it's from the same body that from you.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm sure you can compare across districts too, like if one district maybe.
I'm sure that can happen. And I don't know, whereas NJSLA scores come, are they publishing district scores from Start Strong? I don't know if they are.
Yeah, but it's not sure. I think they're going to be embargoed for a long time, but thinking December is when they'll publish them.
So they're probably benchmarking at the question level, then you'd say, not at the test. So there is no benchmark test. If they chose questions, they're reused questions out of that, so they can get to the question level benchmark.
I'm assuming that's how they're doing it along those lines. They're looking at a historically typical third grader would be here. Now this year, our third graders are here. That would be the assumption of a learning loss based on COVID.
And did you have that data available to you for your PD yesterday?
No, we used our Lincoln data. That was given prior to that. But even at that, even we had it, it's still messy data, right? It's still fresh off, and we look at the sheets of things. Whereas the Lincoln data we used, it was already aggregated and pulled in that, so it would be more challenging. We'd have more time figuring out cleaning up the data to use it than we would actually have.
If I could just, the good news too is that we can add it to linkage, it's just gonna take a little while, so that start prompt can be available on that.
Hey Chuck, two questions on that real quick.
That's good.
Since you said that we actually had individual student results, how's the district gonna be using this? Are you just gonna be assessing it on a grade-wide or school-wide level, or are you actually running a program that's gonna highlight kids who are struggling, and then the teachers will keep an eye on the kids or reach out to them? The second part of that is, will parents get these results, and if so, when?
So the goal is to have individual student
Identification.
identifications, students who are struggling or need help here or there, all the place. The state will give us individual student reports that will have interpretation scores like they do for NGSLA. We're expecting to get those sometime in mid to late October on the Weapon Families Technique.
And the teachers then look at the students in their class.
Students, you have access to the students now. COVID information, as always. Here's our dashboard. You can see we have our 4 cases, 2 in the high school, 2 at Tatum, and 3 at our staff members.
Chuck, we're anticipating 2 of those individuals to return tomorrow.
So then we'll just be down to the 2 high school will be the ones left. Here is our Cali index, and we are back in yellow. So we were in orange for a minute, and now we're back in yellow, which is good. We are not, we talked about changes we're going to make with the classrooms, moving those back to set them up more like last year, based on some of our experience with the close contacts and moving to orange. We're going to still remain with that decision to move those classrooms back right now. Where our numbers right now are on the verge of orange and yellow, high and moderate, we're not going to go back and forth. We're going to go with orange until we feel confident that it's going to be moderate yellow for a while. Otherwise, we'll wear out our maintenance custodians that moving furniture around. Plus, it's also confusing, right? So we're going to do that. We're going to act as if it's still orange, even though we are back in yellow.
And with the exception of some of the early return protocols
Correct.
that are
Right.
associated with the yellow area, we did revert back to those timelines to allow more flexibility, to allow students and staff to return earlier per the Department of Health guidance. And as Mr. Klaus pointed out, what we have to really, a decision point we'll have is if we're going back and forth every week, because we can't manage students in and out on changing numbers, but we did change back to the yellow. Our decision tree information is reflective of that information, and that's good news today.
And hats off to the nurses and Gino, because we found out at 1 o'clock today that we were back in yellow. The decision tree was changed back by 3 o'clock. Right, so we went to a quick meeting, talk it through, make those decisions, and make those changes. So here's our chart. And I highlighted the percentile, which is COVID-like illnesses. We're at 5.38. That's what took us from orange back to yellow. 5.5 is the cutoff, right? So that's how close we are to orange. And that's why it's very likely allergy season, we could be back up to orange next week. So that's why we're playing that safe. There's that piece. Upcoming presentations. We haven't had a lot of presentations in September. We've had back to school nights, schools getting going again. I will tell you this, and I've every administrator, superintendent, teacher I've talked to, this year feels harder than last year, which is amazing. We thought this year was going to be like easy. Like I was going to buy jigsaw puzzles for my office. I had nothing to do all day. Last year, no jigsaw puzzles in my office yet. They're still in the boxes. So we will start our presentation cycle again in the 14th of October when we get back into it and have those coming up. So here's the ones on the 14th. We're going to talk about the calendar, next year's calendar. I'm looking at some changes that are a little different than things we've seen in the past. So I'm doing some research with other school districts in central North Jersey. Looking at those, I'll certainly talk with Rachel and Sean about some of these and look at some of the possibilities. So maybe a little non-traditional on the calendar piece. We're going to have our people come in and talk about the state of our arts, our extracurricular arts. So we're going to hear about our drama clubs in the high school, middle school, choirs up across the board, and get a feel for that. You know, we do focus a lot on we get a lot of presentations about academics and a lot of presentations about athletics. So we are going to start bringing in some of the other things. When you see the number of activities and clubs we have in this district, it's incredible for our size. And most of them are flying under the radar. We're going to try to fly under the radar. We're going to put them on the radar. Whatever the proper metaphor / analogy, that's what we're going to do. The 28th, we're having our long-range facility plan presentation. We are going to have Mr. Banks going to talk about athletics. But in the future, we have service and community clubs and activities. So that's Leo and well, a bunch of those clubs. I mentioned Leo. I have to say, what's that? Interact. Yes, I couldn't go that together. Technology and STEAM. So we have a lot of those type of things going on. Robotics clubs and those things. We want to highlight those. The portrait of a learner. The materials are being printed and processed as we speak. So once they're back, we'll be able to launch those. But if you walk around the high school and the middle school, you'll see them all. Some of the signs are already hanging about that. And then we'll have in November, we'll have our CUSAC self-assessment presentation. And any other questions or comments?
Chuck, I'm sorry. So at the TMPT meeting, something that a mother questioned and a lot of other parents in the room were interested in finding out. And I couldn't remember the details, so I said you brought it up. But they wanted to know what had been decided, if anything, regarding the testing for the kids, the COVID testing, once or twice a week, so that they wouldn't have to quarantine or things of that nature since they can't get vaccinated yet.
So pool testing. So we're still investigating that. So we are not dragging our feet. We're kind of playing a waiting game. And it's a very nervous waiting game because not talking about students, but talking about staff members who need to be tested, right? So there are going to be people who are non-vaccinated who need to be tested weekly. We're trying to look into how to do pool testing for them. The state was vetting certain vendors. We haven't heard what they come back with yet. We know Haddonfield is ready to contract with a vendor, so they're sending their information. Collins was usually a different vendor. We're going to look at what they're doing. But we have until October 18th to start having something in place for our staff. The students pool testing, if we decide to go that route, we would like to do that. We'll follow shortly there. But that's the priority. So once we get more details on exactly what pool testing would look like, how often, the frequency, how we would group the kids or select people, that'll be coming up in the end. Hopefully in the next 2 weeks, because October 18th is only 2.5 weeks away.
But so it's mandated though for the faculty, but for our students, it's optional and
It'll be optional.
what you decide, right? So
we'll offer it. Parents can select it or not select it. Like we can't mandate it. So at least we can't say we're doing all third graders, because some third grade parents may not want to do that. So it'll be an opt-in for this pool test.
And will that prevent them from needing to quarantine if they have been in close contact?
No.
No.
What it will do is hopefully catch a positive case early.
Okay, for my report, I said a few things. First off, CUSAC reminds me of when I first came on the board. We had just gotten our CUSAC score before we passed. And I just want to thank everyone, because I remember coming on and the faculty, the administrators, the entire team was working really hard to get things in order very quickly. And I just remember being a new board member, how impressed I was by how well everyone was organized and chipped in to do their part. And so I just want to commend everyone for that. So if you're feeling confident now, it's really the result of a lot of effort from a lot of people. So thank you to everyone for that. The Linkit, as Mr. Klaus brought up, was the Linkit data was reviewed Wednesday morning, and that was the reason for the delayed opening. And I know that, as parents, it can be a challenge when we have different changes in the schedule, but do know that time is really valuable to our faculty. It's an opportunity for them to evaluate very specific diagnostic data on how the students are doing in individual classes. the opportunity to do that in real time and to look at that data. And then they can use that going forward as they plan their lessons. And so they're able to see very clearly where certain students are struggling, and so that they can adjust lesson plans in order to accommodate that. And so, just to understand that it's a very valuable time, and I appreciate, the teachers going through that, because there's a lot using the data, but the results really, really show in the classroom. So thank you everyone for your cooperation on that. And then lastly, the candidates have submitted their interview questionnaires, the candidates for the Open Board of Education seat. We have our scoring in, we're tallying the scores. We're going to pick the top 5 to 7, and we'll notify them tomorrow, and everyone will be notified regardless of the decision tomorrow. And the plan is to interview them, the top 5 to 7, on October 7th in a public meeting here at 6:30. So, and that's it. Questions? Okay. Now we're going to move on to the public comments on agenda items only. So this is a reminder that we're going back to the 2 comment periods. So this is, if your comment is on the agenda, this is your time to be able to make your comment. So we'll now begin the open public comment session. Members of the community are invited to speak no more than 3 minutes about agenda items at this time. Non-agenda comments will be taken at the end of the meeting and follow the same guidelines. If your 3 minutes is up, we invite you to get back in line if you'd like to make additional comments. This is an opportunity for the board to listen, but not debate issues or enter into question and answer period. Please be aware that not all issues brought up before the board meeting will be resolved that evening. We ask you to state your name and street address, so that just the name of your street, actually, so that a designee can get back to you with a response if warranted. General responses to comments will be posted on the Board of Education website under the Resources tab, where it says Open Public Comment Replies. While public education can be an emotional issue, we strive to maintain a certain level of decorum at the meeting. Public meetings are recorded and televised, and students often participate in the meetings. As such, citizens are expected to maintain a tone of courtesy and civility. So you can, anyone want to make a comment?
Just a question. I'm John Sweeney, APA co-president, 302 Rabbit Court. Start strong. Is the cost, what is the cost, and is it paid for out of COVID funds? Is it being paid for as a new item on the board agenda, on the agenda that was not there previously? And the second thing is, do we know how many staff, students now? Dr. Criollo, you said that we had 4 positives so far. Do we know how many we had to send out for test staff and students?
Thank you. Anyone else like to make a comment? Okay, we'll go on to the items for board approval. Okay, for governance, acceptance of the monthly HID report, approval of the school bus emergency evacuation drill report, approval to abolish the policies, policy approval, first reading for the road forward and the school employee vaccination requirements, policy approval for second reading for a few that we've went over a little bit in the past. Authorize the creation of the LRFP committee. And that's it. Can I have a motion? Okay, Linda and Heather. Discussion? So yeah, we decided to break up the LRFP because the finance facilities being a single committee, we just weren't having enough time that it needed to have to discuss the LRFP. So starting next month, we'll begin meeting separately for both finance and the facilities. Can we call roll? Okay.
Ms. Hope,
Yes.
Ms. Paoli,
Yes.
Mr. Seidel,
Yes.
Mr. Vecchio.
Stepped out to the bathroom.
Yeah, that's why I wasn't sure if I could call it.
We have a forum.
I'm in a pickle.
I have a joke.
I'll tell you what.
There you go.
I'll tell you what. We'll come back. We come back.
What is it? Does it meet my rules?
Probably not.
The open comment,
Well-
public comment?
Well, I'll tell you what, we can, when he comes back, we can affirm that he votes yes to this. Okay.
Just keep on, no,
Yeah.
no, stretch.
Yeah, yeah, a little bit.
All right. Vice President Hogan.
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Vecchio.
Yes.
Okay. President Cricket.
Yes. Okay, curriculum and special education, approval of field trips and conferences and some overnight trips, resolution between Impact Special Needs Consulting, resolution between Family First and the Haddonfield Board of Education, resolution between Gloucester County Special Services and the Haddonfield Board of Education for teacher to deaf consultant, and approval of athletic overnight trips for the 2021-22 school year.
So moved.
Oh, thank you, because I forgot. There's motion,
Second.
Dave and Tom. Okay, discussion?
I do have a question about the athletic overnight trips. The Tom's River Wrestling, is that a traditional overnight trip?
That's regional,
Oh,
it's regional tournaments.
oh, it's right, so they wrestle late into the,
So, yeah, so they'll wrestle, it's an hour and a half ride to get there, weigh probably at 6 in the morning, something like that, maybe 7 in the morning, and then they're done at, so the weigh-ins for the second day are probably 7 in the morning, 8 in the morning. Same for the third day, if it's 3 days, but, you have to leave here 3 in the morning to get there, and
Sure.
it's a 10-hour day, so.
okay, no, fair, thank you.
And it's part of the region, it's part of the state tournament, it's regional.
Anything else? Okay, Mike, can you take a vote?
Ms. Hope,
Yes.
Ms. Paoli,
Yes.
Mr. Seidel,
Yes.
Mr. Vecchio,
Yes.
Vice President Hogarth.
Yes.
And President Cricket.
Yes. Okay, personnel, approval of new personnel, transfers, salary upgrades, mentoring, extracurricular, coaching appointments, leave of absences, resignations, resolution to approve the reading benchmark assessment training, resolution to approve a compensation plan for the nurses, in collaboration with the HEA, resolution to approve, some, employees for ruler training. Make it a motion? Okay. Linda, Rainer? Discussion? Okay, Mike, can you call vote?
Ms. Paoli,
Yes.
Mr. Seidel,
Yes.
Mr. Vecchio,
Yes.
Vice President Hogarth,
Yes.
Ms. Hope,
Yes.
President Cricket.
Yes. Approval of the following business and finance recommendations, approval of the APR ID, did we say IDEA grant or IDEA grant? IDEA grant, approval to fund the following salaries, approval tuition reimbursement, approval of, more tuition reimbursement, accept the donation of the wall mural at Tatum Elementary, which was donated by the Tatum Student Council. accepting the donation of the science and space exploration books. Resolution to approve the settlement agreement. Approval of resolution designated the district agent in contracting for online energy purchasing. Approved to solicit for an RFP for architect of record, and resolution to approve the sidebar agreement on collective negotiations. Payment of bills, the budget transfers, board secretary report, and cash summary. Can I get a motion? Dave?
Second.
Lynn? Discussion?
I have a question. Item 7 in this section, is that the topic of our executive session in the work session last week?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. I think Mike, can we call vote?
Mr. Seidel,
Yes, no on 7.
Mr. Vecchio,
Yes.
Vice President Hogarth.
Yes.
Ms. Hope.
Yes.
Ms. Paoli,
Yes.
President Booker.
Yes. Okay, approval of the following minutes. Minutes from the August 26th regular and executive session. Can I get a motion?
Second.
Okay,
I think this will be the first time I ever point out something. In the finance minute, in the section with the finance minutes, it's not open, so I'm doing this for a moment. It said Miss Benford at the beginning. I think Justin would want that edit taken care of.
Good catch, Dave.
that's good.
I giggled. But then I think,
Just happy Justin isn't here.
yeah.
Hey, Mike, can you call?
Mr. Seidel,
Yes.
Mr. Vecchio,
Yes.
Ms. Vice President Hogarth.
Yes.
Ms. Hope,
Abstain.
Ms. Paoli,
Yes.
President Booker.
Yes. Okay, so, that finishes our voting portion, and now we, have public comments on non-agenda items. So following the same, outline that, in the open public comment statement I made earlier, anyone is welcome to come speak on non-agenda items. Okay, items for future consideration by the board.
So I'm gonna bring up the only second other question that came out of the Tatum, PTA meeting. There was a woman in the crowd who asked, if we had considered, holding like open forum meetings where the public could come and ask questions to maybe just generally understand things. She brought up specifically, and it was super nice, and it was not, she said, she goes, I completely get why you guys can no longer, or why you're no longer answering questions at Board of Ed meetings, and I told her that, they're posted and where to find them. But she said, sometimes we just want to do a talk back and forth, and her whole thing was that she felt that sometimes there's a lot of, I don't know what the word is, tension or something between the board and the public.